And I just love it because it's a very human story about, well, what I just said about Beth, that, even though people die, they can still be with us. And that story has proved very prophetic and meaningful as I have gotten older. And some people that I have just loved profoundly they're not here, but they're here. And this second book was dedicated to my father, Dr. Richard Lee Reece, my mother, Loretta Whitkins Reece, my brother, Carter Strait Reece, and Bishop Leo Friday and Dr. Diana Friday. All my love, all my gratitude to two families who believed in me. So it was a book dedicated to my biological family and then my church family. The Bishop of Southeast Florida and his wife became like my parents, and I'm still very close to them. So this is the first poem from this book, The Road to Emmaus. It's called I See You. And it's like the ICU in a hospital where I was starting to be dressed as a priest, work as a priest. It was all so new to me. It was also awkward to me. And I was in a hospital doing CPE, and part of it was the ICU. But also, of course, the pun on ICU is I see you. Those mornings I traveled north on I-91, passing below the basalt cliff of East Rock, where elms discuss their genealogies. I was a chaplain at Hartford Hospital, took the Myers-Briggs with Sister Margaret, learned I was an I drawn to ease. Oh, this is funny. I'm going to interrupt this poem. We did a test here for the whole vestry, which is all new, and me, coming in after the sad death of the priest here. And we learned after we did the psychological evaluation of the 12 members of the vestry and me, that everybody was an extrovert, which is an E, except for one person who's the I, which is, guess who it was? Me. I was a chaplain at Hartford Hospital, took the Myers-Briggs with Sister Margaret, learned I was an I drawn to ease. In small group, I said I do not like it, the way young black men die in the ER, shot, unrecognized, their gurneys stripped, their belongings cataloged and unclaimed. In the neonatal ICU, newborns breathed, blue, spider delicate, in nests of tubes. A Sunday of themselves, their tissue purpled, their eyelids the film on old water in a well, their faces resigned in plastic attics, their skin mottled mildewed wallpaper. It is correct to love even at the wrong time. On rounds, the newborns eyed me, each one like Orpheus in his dark hallway, saying, I knew I would find you. I knew I would lose you. Okay, that's 2 books down. So now we move to the decade. So that book was published when I was 51 years old. And I'm now reaching the end of the 50s. And in this decade between 50 and 60, which is just coming up on the horizon, I've been very productive. Part of it was, I said, Dr. Diana Friday became like, it was prophetic. I dedicated that book to her because in the beginning of my priesthood, I went down to San Pedro Sula, Honduras, where she founded this orphanage for all girls. It's the only orphanage for girls in Honduras, only for girls. There's 250,000 orphans in the country of Honduras. And I began my priesthood in this orphanage, and we made a documentary film about poetry that's called Voices Beyond the Wall. It won a few prizes. And then, I just gathered them together and helped raise the money for it, but they get all the credit for the beautiful film. And then we also made this book called Counting Time Like People Count Stars, which is an anthology of the poems of the abandoned and abused girls at Our Little Roses. I had never really taught before. I taught them poetry. At first I thought it was going to be the biggest disaster in my life. The teaching went really badly, and they started filming this, but it turned, and they made a beautiful film about poetry, about the girls, and we put together this book. And this book is dedicated to Dr. Noel Vallis, who believed the girls could write, and Dr. Diana Friday, who saved them so they could. So here's the first poem from this book. It's short. It's called Little Rose. So the name of the orphanage is Our Little Roses, Nuestras Pequeñas Rosas. And it was named after Rosa Cisneros, who was a child rights activist who was gunned down during the Civil War conflicts in Honduras and El Salvador. Little Rose. This is by Eileen, age 16. Little Rose, please close your beautiful eyes. I can no longer bear to see the pain inside of them, the pain caused by what I couldn't prevent. Rosita, Rosita, por favor, cierra tus lindos ojos. Ya no aguanto seguir viendo el dolor que llevan dentro, un dolor causado por lo que yo no puedo prevenir. It's a beautiful book. All the money goes to Our Little Roses if you buy the book. I think we raised about $2,000. I hope it's still available, but I think they made us sold out. But it's a very beautiful book, and it's accompanied by black and white photographs that are exquisite. So, as I said, the last decade's been kind of more, it's been busy. I've been a priest, and also it's reaching out more with that effort, for example, where I'm sharing my gift. I believe God's will is for us to share our gifts, not just keep them hidden away. And so the whole thing in Honduras was about that. And then in Madrid, we did an author series that led into a festival, which was huge. And also during the last 18 years, I worked on this. Now we're moving on to book 4. We're reaching the end of getting close to the end of our journey. We're midway on the road to Spencer. So this book is called The Secret Gospel of Mark. My legal name is Mark. If you're an American man of the age born at the time of the Kennedy assassinations, you're probably named Mark. It was the most popular name in America. My parents never used it, but they just called me by my middle name. So in many ways, this memoir is Garcia, believers. That's the dedication page. And the significance of that is that those are 3 men, all of them Roman Catholic, who really encouraged me to be an Episcopal priest. One of my struggles was accepting my sexuality. I thought that I needed to die because I was gay, that I needed to not be on the planet. And these 3 men, who are friends of mine, 1 in Spain, 2 in the US, just have continually been a support and an encouragement. And I mean real friends, like flying over to Spain to help me move, just all kinds of crazy things. So I dedicated it to them because I thought they'd understand. I'm going to read the first chapter. Like I said, I'm keeping true to my structure here. So this is how this book opens, which is a nonfiction biography that is really a celebration of poetry and how it saved my life. It begins with a quote from Montaigne, "I am myself the matter of my book." And the book opens with the most unresolved moment in my life. I don't know if you've ever had an unresolved moment in your life, but this was mine. And it's very short. When there is no faith, joy is destroyed. At 18, I wanted to die. Up there in Brunswick, Maine, the first state to greet the morning sun, at the far corner of the graveyard was an old tool shed, a light gray color, painted so often the wood slats had the consistency of frosting. I moved quickly to the small crooked door that was never locked. Inside, the chilly room was the size of a sacristy, just enough room if you spread out your arms to spin around. The place smelled of coffin sawdust, plastic flowers, and metal tools. There was an odd, crinkled map with the layout of the graveyard and numbers for each square. I peered around to make sure no one had followed me. Then I stripped, hungry and desperate. I ripped my clothes off. My underwear landed in a coffin. Nude, steaming, I shook like a bell struck. I took out the stolen Playgirl magazine I'd sequestered in my backpack and slammed it open on the coffin planks. My hands shook. I shook. I straddled the planks atop two sawhorses. Slivers caught in my upper inner thighs. I galloped like a cowboy, a giddy-up swirl of saliva, sweat, and chuffing. Then I shuddered, sputtered, spumed, squirted, shot. My face grew taut like Christ's on the cross. A need claimed me and left me gratified. The tool shed stilled, the pines stilled, the graves observed my act and went back to their talk with each other. A dead hive above me stuck there like a dusty cherub. The nude man's limbs on the glossy centerfold stuck together from my semen with the consistency of egg yolks. What an astonishment! I couldn't stop my body from this hunt and release upon those nude altarpieces. I drank with similar push-pull greed. I said to myself, I will never do this again. But within a week, I'd be back in that tool shed. My armpits sweat. I wiped myself with a handkerchief left by a mourner. Yet the spice of my act lingered on me and in me and through me. I asked the universe to exterminate me like a rat. I thought God heard me. Now we're winding down. This book also came out this year, was a huge surprise of the pandemic. It's called All the Beauty Still Left, which is a quote from Anne Frank, who said in The Hiding Place, "Think of all the beauty still left and be happy." In the pandemic, I found myself with my mom, who's fully disabled, 24-hour care after a massive stroke, which was one of the reasons that caused me to move back to the States. We were in a very small apartment. I had no idea I would be there over 6 months with her, helping to bathe her, helping her to go to the bathroom. And so during that time, I painted, which I had done all my life. And I couldn't really write. I didn't seem to have the concentration for that. But I kept painting these paintings and I put them up on Facebook. And then this publisher in New York reached out to me and said, let's do a book. I was like, you're kidding me. It's never that easy. It's never that easy. But we did, and it's got a little blue aquamarine ribbon on it. And let's see, this book is dedicated to my godchildren, Eleanor Madge Wenrick and Samuel Martin Owen, all my love. I feel honored to be a godfather. And this opens with, so it's organized according to like a book of hours. So that it starts with vigil, the 8th hour of the night. And the first image is this, which is a in the middle of the night. Sometimes I wasn't sleeping there in Old Lyme. So that's the moon on the water in Old Lyme. And each one of the images is with a quote. And the quote is from Louise Glick, who picked that first book that I read from. And Louise Glick wrote, "The master said, 'You must write what you see. But what I see does not move me.' The master answered, 'Change what you see.'" Well, now we're almost done, David, Father David. So I'll conclude with, this is the book I'm working on now, which will be published in a couple of years. It's a book of poetry. And this book is dedicated to Mary Bridget Chase, All My Love, 1959-2017. So it's dedicated to her because she was, okay, so when I was in college, I went to college out east, and I was the last, I don't think these things exist anymore, but they were called mixers, left over from when there were boys' schools and girls' schools. And Smith was an all-girls, is still an all-girls school. And they would bus the boys in from schools like the one that I went to, and we would go to these dances. And there was a girl there that had a big crush on me, and I felt very guilty, and I liked her, but, you know, and our parents wanted us to marry, and it didn't happen. She's still in my life, Betsy Chase. She became a OBGYN, and she married a guy who looks almost exactly like me. So one of the sweet ironies of life is that as we were all getting older and Betsy's mom became completely senile, she thought I was the husband. So it was like I actually became the husband in this like weird dementia world. And Betsy had a sister whose name was Bridget, who this book is dedicated to. And as Betsy got married and had kids, Bridget and I became closer. Bridget did not get married because she had Hodgkin's lymphoma when she was young, and they irradiated around the heart, and her heart became weaker and weaker as she got older. When I was in Spain, they were finally ready to do a heart transplant, but unfortunately it was too late, and the body would not receive the heart, and she died. So the first poem in this book, so this book is called Acts, which is taking its inspiration from the book of Acts of the Apostles, a book I really like in the Bible. And this book is now about 10 years after the road to Emmaus, and it's sort of the life of being a priest and what all that entails. And a lot of it takes place in Spain. And so the opening poem is in the voice of Sebastian, San Sebastian. And if you've ever been to Spain, San Sebastian is like a frequent saint on all the altars all over Spain. And San Sebastian is like this really gay saint for this super Catholic country that's full of homophobia. But anyway, I'll let you guys unpack that on your own. He's on almost every single altar. And he was this beautiful young man that was shot full of arrows. And so this poem is in his voice. San Sebastian. I, still singing in my cell of succulence, staked by a man who fled. Love, love, I'm wounded. Nothing personal. How often I get that wrong. Tell everyone a tender nightingale tricked me. I move on. Some man is always fleeing, and that is never personal. The longer I go, the fewer notes I need. Give me your hand, love, once more, so this fatal wound will do its work. My torso swells like a hotel, the deep wound of love flown. Martyrdom bores me. My hookups, a new flamenco. Will I be saved? Yes, God damn it, I will be saved. Pitch your vile tracks. The peninsula tilts its goblets. I am alone, but wasn't I always? Wasn't I? Swifts fleck the dry grass. Oh, this wound. By my absence, you'll know me. That's it. That's all the material I've got. I'm not super prolific, but that's what I've got. And thank you for asking me to read.
We are so grateful for you sharing your material with us. And Spencer, that was a fabulous reading. And we do have some questions. Do you have a little time for Q&A? Would that be okay?
I have all the time in the world. We just finished our poetry meditation in the church, and now there's English language classes, so I'm fine.
Wonderful. Boyd writes, he just read your poem, The Clerk's Tale, this afternoon. Absolutely loved it, he says. Tell us a bit about your faith journey as related to your poetry. Were you involved in the church early on when you were writing?
No. I came to faith through Alcoholics Anonymous. I sort of track this narrative in the memoir that just came out. So that really articulates it most clearly if you're interested in it, Boyd. And thank you for asking the question. But if you don't want to read the book, I will now give you the condensed version. So I came to faith in 1985. I graduated from college, and my family had been deeply affected by the disease of alcoholism, and some people had been pickled and lived for decades, but my generation didn't seem to do as well with the drinking. And in 1985, I was graduating from college. My drinking was god awful. And my cousin, my beloved cousin in St. Augustine, Florida, which is slightly near where you are now, was killed in an unsolved murder and a bar fight and drunk. And so that event was kind of my personal crucifixion, which brought me to faith, first through AA, and then my faith expanded and it grew, and it's still growing every week here in the church a lot. And so the church life came later. And the poetry, I metabolized the poetry from an early age, and I basically taught myself how to do it. I didn't go through an MFA or anything like that, so I taught myself in isolation, mainly, how to do it until later.
Thank you, Spencer. Johanna writes, what took you to Spain? How did that experience of living in Spain influence your poetry? We heard just a little bit there about San Sebastian, but I'm sure it'd be wonderful to hear you expand on that.
I got to Spain by an accident. All of my life really has been an accident. All of it. The best parts of it. The parts where I'm willing it are probably the most unattractive parts. I went to Spain because, get this, so I graduated from seminary and I didn't know what I was going to do. And in the same week that I was trying to figure it out, I won the Amy Lowell traveling grant, which provided $60,000, I think, at the time. And the only stipulation of the Amy Lowell traveling grant was that you live abroad for a year. That's all you had to do. You were an American poet and you had to live abroad. And I contacted Leo Friday, who that book is dedicated to, the second book of poetry. And I said, you're not going to believe this. I just won this thing. What should I do? And he said, I think you should go to Spain because I know the bishop there. I'll call him and I'll call you right back. So like 5 minutes later, he called me back and he said, I have a place for you to stay. We'll ordain you over there. And that's how my life began in Madrid. It was only supposed to be for 1 year. When I finished the 1 year, the Bishop of Spain, I wasn't tracking what he was saying because I was on my way to Honduras with a Fulbright that I had won, to my shock also. The Bishop of Spain said, well, I'd really like you to come back and work here with me. And I didn't think too much of it because I didn't think that that was possible. But when I finished my time in Honduras, another whole year later, he contacted me because I was I thought I was going to go work in Miami finally, which was my diocese. And I wasn't that excited about it. And he wrote me just in that week. I'm not kidding. I'm not making it up. And I didn't know why he was back in touch with me. I thought he wanted pictures from Spain. I didn't know why he was back in touch with me. And when he finally reached me live, he said, I want you to come and work for me. And immediately I thought to myself, that's what I want to go do. He said, I can't pay you very much money. You won't have a pension, but will you do it? And I thought, oh, what the hell? So I did, and I was there almost 10 years until now.
After some serious discernment, you came to the.
It was.
Why not? I'll just go.
I don't regret it. It was fantastic. And how did it change my writing life? Well, I learned to speak Spanish. It opened me up to the Spanish Civil War poets. It opened me up to this whole other world, which radically changed who I am and how I move.
Thank you so much, Spencer. I'm looking. Mother Abby comments, so grateful for your work at Our Little Roses. That ministry is so needed and vital. When Mother Abby taught in Miami, she visited there with students from Palmer Trinity School, and Mother Abby worked with Diana Friday. That's awesome.
Oh, cool.
And Laurel wonders, how does your poetry inform your faith and vice versa, perhaps in ways that are different from other forms of expression and reflection?
How does my poetry inform my faith? Was that the question?
That's that, and vice versa.
Oh, by the way, Palmer Trinity, that's the school where they wanted me to go to work in Miami, the week the bishop called. That's the school.
Bless you. It's a unique space.
Yeah, I never went there.
Wow.
But,
Well, much later, I was the assistant chaplain for a small spell before I jumped into other things. It's a neat space too.
Cool. Okay, so okay, what was that? Oh, how does poetry affect my what is it again, David?
How does your poetry inform your faith?
Yeah, simple question. Why can't I retain that? I love poetry. I can't explain why I love poetry, even as a little kid. My parents were very literate. They read a lot of books. My mother was really intent that I go to libraries and find books and read books. And they had a great passion for for literature. They were not religious. I think, as I said earlier, that, I made a metaphor in the not a, or is it a simile in the memoir that, they would read the New York Times and they were almost like church steeples over their heads. Like, that's what I saw on Sunday, was the New York Times were my steeples. And with poetry, I felt like it was this whole private world of solace. And I really needed that as a kid, with the alcoholism, and then that combined with feeling that I was going to be different, and my difference was going to cause me pain even before it happened. So poetry helped a lot with that.
Spencer, let me ask a follow-up that may or may not
ask me. Yeah.
That may or may not be related, but increasingly I'm interested in the connections between poetry and prayer. Help us understand, in your own journey of faith, the connections between the work of poetry and prayer and oblation, to use an old-fashioned word of oblation, self-offering, kenosis. Say a word about the connections between poetry and prayer as well.
Well, I do think the making of poems somehow, which is very mysterious to me. I think Elizabeth Bishop, they asked her this question. She was like, I don't know how it gets written. I don't know how I do these things. It's just like, it's a hell of a lot of hard work. And suddenly there's the poem. I know she was being slightly facetious, but actually I think there's a lot of it's truth to that. For me also, it's quite mysterious. And then there's the poem. And I think in the writing of it, I'm working something out in the quietude of it. This is true with painting as well. And in that silence, in the Holy Spirit moves, I think, through creative outlets, which are open to anybody on the planet, not just me, a writer or a painter or Picasso, but to anybody, can have a creative outlet. And I think God wants us to have these creative outlets. And when we are creating something, we're connecting to the Holy Spirit. I firmly believe it, and I have seen it with those girls at Our Little Roses. And that gives us a great sense of joy, and it's open to everybody. That's what I got for you.
Thank you, Spencer. A couple more. Who are a couple of your favorite poets, Boyd wonders?
Well, I sort of, the structure of the memoir is contrapuntal, and I pick these 6 major figures that each chapter kind of filters through the poetry and biography of those poets. So obviously those 6 are very important to me, and they are. Sylvia Plath is the first. Her portal into anger and injustice just totally brought me into the world of poetry. Elizabeth Bishop, George Herbert, Gerard Manley Hopkins, James Merrill. Gosh, who else is in there? Oh, and Emily Dickinson. Oh my gosh, how could I forget her? So transformative. And there's a lot of modern poets that I read, and I'm very inspired by new poets. I think they influence me in other ways. So Frank O'Hara, Philip Larkin, gosh, there's just so many. And fiction writers, James Baldwin is one of my he's like a poet, but he's writing fiction and nonfiction, and I've always really, really loved his stuff. And it's many others.
And maybe just to build on that, before I get to Elizabeth's question, if you could just expand a little bit about Hopkins as both a spiritual and a poetic influence?
Oh, and I also thought of Flannery O'Connor. Oh my God, those short stories, so good. Um, Hopkins invented his own language. It's almost like a Pentecost, every single poem. And they're just so alive with the Holy Spirit, and they're practically skittering off the page. And I think they're just like guides to me, and I think of them a lot. He and Dickinson kind of suffered so much in their isolation, and they were just not known. I mean, it would blow their minds to know how beloved they became. And I just love them so much. At this point, I've almost metabolized them, so I don't read them anymore. They're just part of me.
There's a kind of ecstatic nature of Hopkins' work that I think is just beautiful. Thanks for sharing that, Spencer. I think we have time for maybe just a couple more, but Elizabeth wonders, have you shared your beautiful gift in writing in Spanish for your Spanish-speaking folks, your friend, your audience and friends? Have you written in Spanish?
Oh, no. I mean, I do my sermons every single Sunday in Spanish, but my Spanish is, I learned Spanish at the age of 46. I'm 57 now. I've been speaking it since that time, off and on, reading it, making it better, working on it. But I'm not like bilingual since birth. I don't pretend to be. I love speaking Spanish. I think what I offer the Spanish congregation is that I am way more vulnerable when I deliver sermons in Spanish, because it's just, I don't have the command of it. I have some kind of command of it, but I forget words. I mix it up. I mispronounce things. And so I think I kind of like that today, that it does that to me. And but I don't write poems in it yet. I write sermons in it, but mainly I've thought through them in English before I translate them into Spanish. So
How about translation of Spanish poets into English? Have you done any of that work, Spencer?
I do. I have, well, the girls' book was like that. I had help with that. And in the second book, this third book of poetry, I have a letter from the Civil War and a poem by Ternura that I've translated into English. And the poem that I read you, part of it is a cento, which means that lines are taken from another poem. And those lines are taken from a poem that's in a play by Federico Garcia Lorca. So I love that, and I want to do more of it. And aware of my limitations and seeing what the possibilities can be. But I love it. I have a lot of Latinx poet friends now. I'm very involved in that community and all that they do because of this background. And it's just opened up a whole nother world to me.
Yeah, I think it's I'm trying to get her name. I think it's Yumpa Lahiri, the Indian writer, and she has just written a book in Italian, which is not her native language, and she talks about how writing in a non-native language has opened up this whole other channel of creative expression for her.
Well, that takes balls. I mean, I don't think I could do that. I wouldn't, because my Spanish just isn't at the level of my English. It is at a certain level, and I can totally communicate and provide pastoral care, and I some days it's like incredible. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't speak English all day. But I still don't trust myself with like writing a book in Spanish. I just think that would be kind of like, I've been humiliated, or I'm too humble, or I just couldn't do it. I don't think I'll do it.
Okay.
But my hat is off to her for trying to do that.
Thank you. Abby wonders, what you learned about yourself as you taught poetry in Honduras.
Oh,
What was that? What did you learn from that experience?
well, I think I learned like everything in the classroom with the girls. It was a very charged and strange and powerful situation that we all found ourselves in. I had not taught. I was a tall white guy from America that looked like the people that had completely decimated their country. Um, my Spanish was not very good. So, but the amazing thing that happened that year was that they had so much shame about being abandoned and abused. And I had a lot of shame about being a gay man. And I think they sensed this, we had the same thing in common that we weren't naming, and that they recognized in me. And we became, the first and second semesters were a disaster in terms of the teaching. And I say that, but maybe that's being too harsh on myself. But it turned when I realized that, I think it was my mother that asked me, did I love him? And I did. So once I articulated that, the teaching got better. And I didn't use textbooks. I had memorized about 20 poems. I've said the poem. They memorized the poem. They wrote the poem. I said, you can take this poem with you wherever you go, no matter what anybody thinks of you. You can hold your head up high and you can recite William Shakespeare, and wherever you go, you can do that. And then they did. And we had a board of directors meeting, all these people from Miami. The girls came in and they recited William Shakespeare, Sonnet 18, shall I compare thee to a summer's day, thou art more lovely and more temperate. And it just, everybody was in tears. So I think it, I don't know. It changed me. I think because they also really loved me, and I didn't see that coming, and they really told me. One girl who had been found in a well with a rock around her neck, and she'd been in the home since she was a little girl, told me that we had the scene that was cut from the film, which was probably good, but it was the two of us, this girl who had this horrendous, unspeakable, unthinkable story, and myself. And at the end of this conversation, she said, well, I know why God brought you here now. I know now why God brought you to us in San Pedro Sula, Honduras. And I said, well, tell me, because I still don't know what I'm doing or why I'm here. And she said, God brought you here because you understand us. And I said, well, how can that be? I'm so different. I mean, in every possible way. And she said, oh no, mister, because that's how they call me mister there. She said, oh no, mister, you know what it's like to be thrown away. And that's why you're here. So they were very smart, as you can tell. And if you have a chance to see that film, it's beautiful. If you have it in your heart to sponsor a girl there, is $720 a year. I think it's like $20 a week. And those sponsorships go so far. We've sponsored 4 girls here at St. Mark's. So, obviously the year and the time there, it stays with me and affected me deeply. And they just do amazing work there. They take these girls that are found on the street that, without the home would be prostitutes or maids immediately, and they become dentists, they become engineers, they become lawyers, girls filled with self-esteem. It's just remarkable. And so
poets, I mean, right?
Yeah, poets. So that I've been more affected by what people do than what they say. I think that's why this last book of poetry is called Acts, because it's the actions. It's when I see something that affects me often in the church more profoundly than what people say.
Spencer, last question.
Yeah.
And this comes from my friend and mentor and member, Jimmy Kimbrell, who is a longtime faculty member at Florida State and a fabulous poet and fabulous teacher. Jimmy wonders, have you ever found that the public part of being a poet has come into conflict with the private solace that poetry brings?
Yeah. Yes. I think it's no accident that the careers that I have chosen or that chose me or whatever happened to me through Brooks Brothers, and then, I deliberately at some level chose the church rather than being on faculty as a poet, which I'm not saying is wrong or bad. Some of my best friends are poetry teachers at universities and are very fulfilled, and it's a great experience, and I love them, and I'm proud of them. But I think for me, this person as an artist, I needed some kind of camouflage, if you will, or another kind of way of presenting myself other than as a poet, because I needed to keep it protected in some way. And I think that is how I have done that. And, these acts in the last 10 years of a film, of a anthology, of a festival, of starting this Latinx Lorca scholarship thing that I'm involved in, they're all outward public gestures, but they're going through me and they're not about me. And that just feels like the time of my life to be doing that. And then the writing, I think I do keep it kind of on the down low, as the young kids say, right? Those young kids, what are we going to do with them?
Spencer, I have to ask one more question.
Yeah. I am yours.
This is short, but have you ever written any hymns?
No, I'm not.
It's time for a hymn text. Come on, Spencer.
No.
Auden did it. Richard Wilbur. Come on, man.
They were very good metricians with meter, and
yes,
I've memorized both of those guys. And I shared those with the girls for them to understand meter. And I love music in the church. This I probably shouldn't say, but sometimes I like the music more than the sermons. The music really sends me to another place. And I moved. We did that hymn during the Eucharist last Sunday. Now I'm not going to remember it. This is why I can't write hymns, but it's one of those very moving African-American spiritual things. It was just...
Let us break bread?
No, that was it. How did you know that was it?
Well, you said Eucharist, spiritual.
Oh, yeah, that was it. And I was so moved by that thing. I was just very moved. So I'm often very moved by music, but I don't have many skills there.
Well, we've been very moved by your reading, by the generosity of your time tonight with us,
It's been
in
fun.
responding to all of these wonderful questions. I just want the group to know that I was introduced to Spencer through a colleague and friend by the name of Scott Walters, who is the rector of Calvary in Memphis and a great appreciator of the arts and poetry. And when Scott was telling me about Spencer, he's like, "Oh, you got to meet this guy, Spencer. He's a priest, he's a poet." He said, "He's not just filled with the Holy Spirit, he is the Holy Spirit." So, so thank you so much, Spencer, for a fabulous reading and just for being you and for your leadership and ministry in the church. We are grateful for you. We love you, and we ask God's blessings, continued blessings, on your ministry as both poet and priest. Thank you.
Okay, these Zoom things are always hard to end. Do you want me to say a little prayer?
Yes, that would be perfect.
Okay. Dear God, God of love and God of compassion, I ask you to watch over the people at St. John's and especially dear David as he pursues a new path, a new Camino. I ask you to be with him and watch over him and his wife and his children and all the people there in St. John's and Tallahassee, and that they know that Jesus came down to earth and sacrificed himself to fill us with forgiveness and to let us know that we are loved profoundly by God, despite whatever we have done, that God's love is profound and it's for everybody. Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
God's
Good
peace
night.
be with you all. Thank you, Spencer.
Peace be with you.
Good night, everyone.